Today we'll begin a series of videos that looks at wolf management in Montana and how it harms the wolf population, diminishes the integrity of the surrounding ecosystem, and what you can do to help stop the killing of your wolves and other wildlife. Hi, welcome back to the Science of Wolves. This video will be a bit different than the previous ones because instead of answering questions that were submitted by the public, this entire video will be the start of answering a common question people ask me all the time. And it needs to be addressed because it's an important issue in the lives of wolves. Given that wolves are hunted 6 months out of the year here in Montana, the most common question I get from the public is how can I stop this deplorable practice? And this is mostly from people who don't live here. And the answer to this question is not straightforward, although there are some things you can do immediately, which we'll get to in this video. However, a sustainable solution will take time to create and involve learning more about wolves themselves, such as how wolves live in the environment and the positive influence they have on the surrounding ecosystem. You'll also need to know how wolf management contributes towards the degradation of this process, and how you can help prevent this from happening. This will encompass going over a great number of topics, including how wolf population numbers are determined by government wolf managers and then utilized towards the, quote, management of wolves. In fact, what does the term management actually mean? We'll get to that too. And when it comes to studying wolves in the wild, it turns out that wolf management affects almost everything, including the wolves' habitat, even their behavior. Therefore, these effects need to be considered when studying wolf behavior. Over the coming months, I'll toggle between wolf management and wolf research, meaning mine and other scientists, because it's all interrelated, either directly or indirectly. Therefore, I'll be telling two stories simultaneously over time, which is wolf research and the basics of wolf management. Here are some examples of what I mean and how they've been affected by wolf management. For example, I studied the fish trap pack for 9 years, but in the end, the entire pack, including the pups, were killed in a management control action. It was precipitated by the pack's apparent killing of a domestic cow. And I say apparent because there was no direct evidence that they killed the cow, although they had been eating on it, therefore they likely killed it. However, the entire pack was removed because they were implicated in several other attacks over a decade of time, and wolf managers wanted to just eliminate the possibility of this continuing behavior in the future. So they were all killed. And this ended the longest behavioral study of wolves in Montana's history outside of Yellowstone National Park. Therefore, wolf management had huge impacts in this case. And in the future, a Science of Wolves video will go over the results of this study and what actually happened. In the coming months, we'll also go over my study of Tenino, and she was a wolf in the wild who was captured and placed into captivity. But who put her there? Well, wolf management did, and in this case, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She had come from the original 9-mile pack in northwest Montana, and there were several black pups at the time, so one of these black pups in the video is likely her, just before her capture. The study documented that the process of her capture, along with her subsequent captivity, produced post-traumatic stress disorder. So we'll review her past and how she was captured and the science behind this project. You'll also learn about Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the state agency responsible for wolf management and the management of many other species. They are also responsible for measuring the wolf population numbers each year, and as you'll see, the results have been a contentious issue for years between a handful of scientists and the government. I know because I'm one of those scientists. We looked at the government data from different perspectives and came to similar conclusions. The data oftentimes makes little or no sense. The public has been involved as well, but there's an element of confusion, given that most people don't know where the numbers came from to begin with. Therefore, we're going to go over some of these data reviews, which can actually be kind of entertaining, because you won't believe what Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks considers to be science. If my students in the past conducted studies in such a manner, they would have flunked the assignment. And given the reasons I just reviewed, along with other potential negative effects wolf managers can have on wildlife and field research, it's safer for the wolves that I currently study for me to say little to nothing about them at this time. It's no secret that wolf packs live within the region where I currently live, but virtually nothing is known about their daily activities. Best to keep it that way because there are so many potential ways of destroying them, from hunting activities to poaching, and most especially wolf management. A wolf's life is already extremely difficult, but now also has the added probability that they will not even come close to living out their potential lifespan because of mortality caused by humans. Therefore, there's no reason to give these people a head start by providing them with any specifics. Brings up the important topic of helping to protect wolves and other wildlife. This needs to be a collaboration among scientists, the public, and environmental groups. Although these interactions have existed for decades, there are still more wolves now than ever before getting killed, so there is certainly room for improvement, especially increased public engagement with helping wildlife and a better understanding of the current issues, which means the science needs to be used and understood properly so that the best decisions can be made regarding the integrity of our ecosystems. However, a huge hurdle to overcome is that most people are not fully aware of most environmental issues to even have the opportunity to help. So education first, but those who do know what's going on need to act. The integrity of our natural world has a finite timeline, and its destruction cannot go on for much longer without ecological collapse. For example, we'll be going over the wolves' place in the environment as well, and how wolves and other predator species can help heal the ecological damage that's already been done from human activity. This is because predators, most especially wolves, have many positive influences on all ecosystems of the world. Plus, if solutions can be found and implemented, the same process of helping wildlife can be used to tackle even the biggest of environmental issues, like us, and our overpopulation of a planet that has finite resources. If we don't get this one under control, then everything else is a moot point. In the meantime, it turns out that the destruction of predator species around the world has had huge negative impacts on ecosystems, both terrestrial and aquatic. These effects have shown scientists that wolves and other predators are the glue that help keep ecosystems intact, and we need as many of them as we can conserve at this point. Therefore, we have much to go over in the coming months, now that you understand umvelts and have a glimpse of the umvelt of wolves. And, in the future, we'll look at additional aspects of their world as well. But for now, you need to get an idea and an understanding of the umvelt of wolf managers. Therefore, I'll be presenting all these topics and more in this format, meaning toggling back and forth between wolves and management. That's because I don't want to end up providing simplistic and incomplete examples for issues that are interactive and complex. So it will take time to learn the effects of these interactions and what you can do about them. Eventually, you'll see how all this information is related and how the destructive power of wolf management is perpetuated. And at that point, you'll know what to do about it if you would like to help stop the killing of your wolves. And these are your wolves. And you have the right, and you have rights to protect them. So let's start there and how we got into this position we're in now. Almost 30 years ago, the Northern Rocky Mountain Wolf Recovery Plan came into existence to help gray wolf populations recover in this area of the United States. It was necessitated by the fact that by 1925, gray wolves were almost extinct in the lower 48 states. That was caused by hunting, fear, and the hatred for these animals, which reduced their population from one of the most widespread mammalian species on Earth to near extinction, at least in the U.S. By 1950, however, wolves were occasionally seen in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, but no known self-sustaining breeding pairs existed. That's because the process of wolf populations establishing themselves was hampered by the fact that wolves dispersing from Canada into the U.S. were killed in Montana and Idaho, and in fact in every decade through 2000. Therefore, the wolf population didn't increase by much, even with some future protections. And one of those protections was the Endangered Species Act of 1973. And by 1974, the wolves were protected under that. So several functioning wolf packs, because of this protection, were documented within northwest Montana through the 70s and 80s. But dispersers from Canada were still being killed, the very individuals that could have expanded the local wolf population. In 1990, the U.S. Congress establishes a wolf management committee to recommend wolf recovery strategies for Yellowstone National Park in central Idaho. The reason was that there were over 1,000 wolves living in the state of Minnesota at the time, but almost no wolves living in the western states. They had years to get there, for example, the dispersers from Canada, but they kept getting killed on their way to the remote wilderness area in central Idaho and Yellowstone National Park, where wolf populations could potentially flourish. However, these two areas were surrounded by cities, towns, and a gauntlet of people who hated wolves. So the only practical way to get the wolves there was to skip over the human population and reintroduce the wolves directly into these areas. Over the next 4 years, an environmental impact statement was conducted and created, which looked at various methods of reintroduction and their likely success. In 1994, a consensus was reached on what methods to use, and that would be wolves would be reintroduced into central Idaho and Yellowstone National Park for 3 to 5 years, and under the designation of a non-essential experimental population, which is a category provided for by the Endangered Species Act. This designation allowed for additional management flexibility if needed. But how would it be known when the recovery process was successful? In other words, what's the end point, and when could the recovery process stop? As a quick review here, remember that the overall recovery process consisted of 3 areas: a natural recovery process in northwest Montana, and 2 reintroduction areas, which were Yellowstone National Park and central Idaho. So given the information from the Environmental Impact Statement study, the federal government created the criteria that they would use to define the successful wolf recovery process. And that was success would be achieved when at least 30 breeding pairs of wolves were established among the 3 recovery areas over 3 successive years. In other words, at least 30 breeding pairs needed to be up and running throughout Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming over 3 successive years for a wolf recovery to be considered successful. So, in 1995, reintroduction began by removing wolves from Canada and placing 15 of them into Yellowstone National Park and 17 more into central Idaho. In 1996, Yellowstone National Park received 17 more wolves from Canada and 10 wolf pups from a depredating pack in northwest Montana. 20 wolves were also released into central Idaho. In 1999, as the wolf population continued to grow in the tri-state wolf recovery area, the governors of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming renewed a 1997 Memorandum of Understanding to coordinate public involvement with their future plans to manage wolf populations in each of these states. And by 2000, the governor of Montana appointed 12 Montana citizens to the new Montana Wolf Management Advisory Council, which was chaired by a rancher. The council's function was to advise the already existing Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on wolf management in anticipation for the day when the states became responsible for wolf management. In the meantime, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was still responsible for completing the recovery process. And 2000 is the year that they determined that there were at least 30 breeding pairs throughout the recovery area. Now came the last phase of recovery, in which there needed to be at least 30 breeding pairs over 3 successive years. When that occurs, then wolf recovery will be deemed as a success in each state, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and each of those states will take control of managing the wolves in their areas. In 2001, this gets more complicated because the governor of Montana directs Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to draft a wolf conservation and management planning document. This is to get ready for the eventual delisting of wolves from the endangered species list, at which time their management will be turned over to the states. In Montana, after the wolves are delisted, they will be legally reclassified as a species in need of management. That's because this new law will provide provisions for the defense of life and private property when a wolf is attacking, killing, or threatening to kill a person or a livestock. So they were thinking of everything. And in the year 2001, also, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimated for the entire wolf recovery area that there are now 35 breeding pairs and 51 packs, totaling about 550 wolves. And in Montana, they had about 123 of these wolves, along with 7 breeding pairs. So 2001 is now the second year in the 3-year countdown to delisting. And keep in mind that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the federal agency responsible for defining what species are endangered and placing them on the endangered species list, then mandated to get them off the list eventually, which was the entire point of wolf recovery. By 2002, the Montana Wolf Conservation and Management Planning document is released to the public. In addition, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks begins to develop an environmental impact statement to develop how wolves will be managed by the state after delisting occurs. This document presents 5 alternatives on how this might be accomplished. Also in 2002, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates that there are now 43 breeding pairs and about 663 wolves in the entire wolf recovery area. Montana now has about 183 of them, along with 17 breeding pairs. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announces that the Northern Rockies gray wolf population has achieved the biological recovery under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So in 2003, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service expected to begin the official administration process of delisting gray wolves in the Northern Rockies, because by now an estimated 761 wolves with 51 breeding pairs are counted in the tri-state Rocky Mountain Wolf Recovery Area. And at the end of that year, it was estimated 182 wolves, along with 10 breeding pairs, were residing in Montana. In addition, wolf management plans are completed by Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming and submitted to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service so that the wolves can be officially delisted. In 2004, however, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approves the state management plans from Montana and Idaho, but they reject the Wyoming's plan. That's because Wyoming's plan was to kill any wolf that entered the state. So that was a very bad plan. So now delisting was delayed for all states until Wyoming submitted a wolf management plan that made sense. And at this point, an estimated 835 wolves, that included 66 breeding pairs, were in the overall wolf recovery area. And now Montana had an estimated 153 wolves with 15 breeding pairs. So the wolf population is steadily growing. In 2005, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service adopts a more flexible way of regulating and completing a cooperative agreement with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks so that the wolves can be managed by the state. And at that point, it's estimated that there are now 256 wolves and 19 breeding pairs in Montana. In addition, in 2005, Montanans form a diverse working group of private citizens and non-governmental organizations and state and federal agencies to begin developing the Montana Livestock Loss Reduction and Mitigation Program. In other words, the state's getting prepared for managing their own wolves, and the livestock industry is already getting prepared for potential wolves killing their cattle. By 2007, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks proposes a tentative trapping and hunting season, which was approved by the Montana Fish and Wildlife Parks Commission, and it was approved to begin the following year in 2008. However, although delisting occurred in March of 2008, third-party organizations challenged this ruling, which delayed state management actions until 2009. But by 2009, the wolves were officially delisted in Idaho and Montana, allowing these states to manage their own wolves, and hunting and trapping is part of that management process. As you can see, the process of wolf recovery produced a number of complicated processes, laws, and committees, all with fancy names, and you don't need to remember it all, but at least you now have an idea of how complex it all was, trying to satisfy diametrically opposing viewpoints and coming to some kind of consensus on how to produce sustainable wolf populations in the western United States. So now you're caught up, and the seasonal killing of wolves has been going on since 2009. Hundreds of wolves are killed each year in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and here are some examples of that. During the hunting season last year, Montana hunters and trappers killed 286 wolves, which is up from 258 from the previous season. And at that time, the state's 2023 wolf population was estimated at 1,096 wolves, which is slightly below the 10-year average of 1,140 wolves. But that's still above federal government guidelines. Also during the hunting season last year, hunters and trappers in the state of Idaho killed over 560 wolves. And this is still 10% lower than the previous year. In other words, Idaho kill a whopping number of wolves every year. And in Wyoming, 118 wolves died in 2023, with 104 of those deaths caused by humans. Although the number varies in each state every year, in general, there are around 950 to 1,000 wolves destroyed in the western United States annually. And this is only in 3 states. And they're the ones that comprise the wolf recovery area in the past. California, Oregon, and Washington also have wolves, but there are no hunting seasons at this time. Although there is an occasional wolf sighting in Nevada, there is yet to be an established wolf population that we know about. The same applies to Utah. Colorado also has wolves now, after 10 were reintroduced in December of last year. And the Colorado Wolf&WildlifeCenter, among others, is currently promoting the process of using non-lethal methods of responding to the killing of livestock by the reintroduced wolves. So, like the other states with significant wolf populations, Colorado is figuring out which direction its management policies are going to go. The states that have minimal or potential for gray wolf populations will have to eventually deal with the usual hatred towards wolves by the local public and the potential for implementation of hunting seasons as part of wolf management. A number of states have already been trained by Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Park wolf managers, which is why it's so important to understand how the state of Montana manages its wolves. The state of California took exception to these practices back in 2017 when they had only a few packs, and at that time they asked me to talk with them about the wolf situation in Montana. I met with the top 2 wolf managers in the state at the time, who explained that they wanted a scientist's perspective of the wolf situation in Montana, in addition to the perspective of wolf managers. Their concern was that they didn't want to make the same mistakes as Montana wolf managers had done and continue to do. So my question to you is, does any of this bother you? If so, then you'll need to make some kind of long-term change to end the killing of wolves. To do that, it will take months for people to understand what is really happening out here. Thus, all the subjects I went over earlier that we'll cover through the rest of the year. But what can you do right now to get a start on helping wolves? First, then, know your rights. In the United States, we have the Code of Federal Regulations. Within it includes the Department of Interior Fish and Wildlife Policy. And within that is the state and federal relationships. In other words, the statutes the managers must follow to keep our wildlife areas intact. The exact wording of these statutes can be found on the Cornell Law School website. Here's an example. In one of the statutes, it states, "The Secretary of the Interior reaffirms that fish and wildlife must be maintained for the ecological, cultural, educational, historical, aesthetic, scientific, recreational, economic, and social values to the people of the United States, and that these resources are held in public trust by the federal and state governments for the benefit of present and future generations of Americans. It goes on to explain that both state and federal agencies must interact to achieve these goals. And here's an example of an additional online site that provides a quick review of how our forests are used. It's actually pretty interesting, and it provides the basics of forest management, and it puts it in a way that anybody can understand. In general, about 1/3 of the U.S. is forested. Approximately 58% of this forested land is privately owned, and the public owns the rest, mostly as national forests. And there are a variety of management agencies that manage it for you based on utilizing the natural resources these forests provide, such as timber, fisheries, cattle grazing, and so on. Nevertheless, you own it, and sometimes there are conflicts when the public feels that management has gone too far. In this case, they definitely have when it comes to the killing of our wolves. They've done so legally, ethically, biologically, and economically. Therefore, it's also important to know how protected areas in the United States are classified, which will help in understanding how wolves are managed. And there are 3 major classifications of protected areas. Wilderness areas are classified as the most protected. There are no wheeled vehicles allowed, no harvesting of any kind, whether that's flora or fauna, and no mechanized equipment. It's owned by the federal government, and the goal is to retain the primeval characteristics of those areas. However, human beings can still recreate in them, but in a very limited way. These areas also tend to be above the tree line, where humans are not interested in exploiting natural resources. National parks are the next most protected. They're also owned by the federal government, and they're dedicated to preserving national and historical resources for future generations, which means there are lots of public visitors which can have direct impacts on the wildlife. In fact, there's a fair amount of news coverage about people getting too close to the bison in Yellowstone National Park. They can irritate these animals, and if too close, they are sometimes attacked and gored by bison and sometimes killed. But most national parks are not large enough to encompass the entire area necessary for some species to travel or procure adequate resources throughout the year. One example is wolves. Part of wolf pack behavior is that some individuals leave the pack to start their own pack. They're called dispersers, and when they cross the boundaries of Yellowstone National Park, they are often killed by poachers and hunters. The constant visitors within the park, among other factors, have caused the wolves' behavior to change, and over time they exhibit some behavioral differences compared to the majority of wolves who live in national forests. For example, aggression can go up among packs competing for limited resources, within the park, and so on. They try to leave the park, but then they're shot and killed. The point being that because of the size of many national parks, they can have limited capacity to provide the actual environmental conditions needed by a variety of species. And consequently, many national parks have lost approximately 25% of their mammalian species. In national forests, which are the least protected areas, the wolves have way more area in which to live, and the overwhelming majority of wild gray wolves live in these areas. However, there are many issues associated with that because these are the least protected lands. For example, there's still some mining, cattle grazing, forestry practices, and lots of public recreation. However, national forests are owned by you, the public, meaning U.S. citizens, and it's managed for you by both federal and state agencies. However, and unfortunately in national forests, bulls and other wildlife are killed to accommodate hunters, ranchers, and to generate income. Future videos will go over how state agencies are managing your wolves and the effects that management have on the surrounding environment. And science has shown that the effects can be quite devastating. Most of wolf management, at least in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming so far, is based on hunting these animals, and there are a number of reasons for that, which we'll go over in the future videos. But the main reason is that state agencies make money hunting wolves, and they even use the term harvest. In other words, wolves are like corn. They're harvested each year, money is made, it keeps the wolf haters along with hunters and trappers happier, and enough wolves are left alive to repeat the cycle again the following year. So unsurprisingly, there are a number of negative effects this process produces. This is the flowchart of the negative issues associated with the hunting of wolves. You can stop this video at any time to get a closer look at the details, but in general, there are 5 major categories of problems. For example, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has claimed that livestock depredation is too high, and then used this reasoning as an excuse to kill wolves. The reality is that wolves are responsible for less than 0.1% each year of livestock losses. In other words, this problem hardly exists. Nevertheless, it's a very real problem for the livestock owner who suffered the loss, both economically and emotionally. So this is a social issue rather than a biological one, and we'll take a look at the numbers behind all this in future videos. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has also claimed that wolves threaten prey populations, another excuse to kill wolves. The reality is that there is no consensus of how wolves influence prey populations anywhere, at least in Montana. Studies are still being conducted, especially on elk, and the results are often debated by researchers. Obviously, wolves are predators, and of course they affect the prey populations that they hunt. In this case, however, the point of wolf management is to produce as many prey that hunters can kill as possible each year. They make more money that way, and since the environment is such a mess because so many predators are killed, among other destructive behaviors, prey populations are not balanced with the surrounding environment, and we will certainly go over why this is the case in future videos. And there's always public attitude to deal with. And the public attitude, at least locally, has the expected negativity towards wolves and other predators. They don't like grizzly bears either. However, the rural population is changing, and different attitudes are brought into the area by people who move here from out of state. The overall public view is slowly becoming less hostile towards wildlife because more and more people are in favor of wolves. I've found, however, that they tend to stay quiet because they don't want trouble. But in the meantime, the hunting of these animals has helped promote the hatred towards wolves by providing an outlet of this attitude, while Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks makes money on it. They also make the claim that wolf recovery and hunting is based in science. This is definitely not true, as scientists such as myself have demonstrated to be the case. In addition, they simply don't use the best available science and ignore the studies that don't agree with the agency's management policies. We will certainly go over that in the future, such as their flawed numbers, illogical conclusions, and how arbitrary this entire process actually is. Probably the most damaging of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks policies is their disregard to how predators, and not only wolves, positively affect our ecosystems, and in ways that can help us heal the destructive results of what managing wildlife has already produced. We'll take a close look at that in the future as well. In other words, there is virtually a video for everything here, which is why it takes so long to cover so many subjects. And they are all linked via so-called management. In the meantime, what can you do right now? Well, despite all the petitions over the years and the various organizations trying to stop the hunting of wolves, there are just as many wolves dying now than there's ever been. So if you want to see something different, you're going to have to do something different. For example, what would have the most impact? A petition with 100,000 signatures on it sent to these agencies via one email or one letter? Or 100,000 emails, letters, and phone calls, and so on, over a short period of time? You'll get their attention, but they know the general population doesn't have the drive or the attention span or the means to cooperate long enough to produce a sustained protest. And that's where Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks derives its power over the public. The general population just gives it to them. However, I'm willing to bet that humanity is better than that. First, educate yourself. And, like these videos or other places to go. Second, do something constructive about it. And third, some people or organizations will need to step up to help redirect people's efforts so that individuals submit their complaints to the government on a consistent basis rather than through organizations representing them. By all means, please support your favorite nonprofit and other organizations. But they can't replace what people must do for themselves. And they have to do it together. And it won't cost you anything either. So over the next few months, I'll show you how you can do all this in an informed way. But remember, you own national forests. And these are your wolves in any national forest. And it doesn't matter which state you live in. The government only manages the forests for you. So if you don't like what they're doing, you need to speak up, but do so collectively. Individuals are too easy to ignore. Overall, you are the solution. Organizations can help, but the public working together must solve this. Organizations can't do the work that you must do for yourself. You have tremendous power if you work together over a long period of time. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks only carries out the state's policies and has little power to change them. But you can flood their system with a great number of phone calls, emails, and letters. The same with the state legislatures and governor's office. If you live in Montana, Idaho, or Wyoming, vote these people out. However, you can't get elected in these states unless you support the killing of wolves and other predators. So make it impractical to do so and back up their system with your sustained protests. The hunting of wolves is not going to stop until the public, as a group, stands up and says no more. Over the next few months, I'll provide you with additional details and information that you can use to make your protests a bit more effective. This is going to take a long time to solve this problem, but it's still better than never. And in the meantime, lots and lots of wolves are getting killed. And speaking of which, hunting season begins on September 7th here in Montana. So now's a good time to begin a sustained protest. And this actually hasn't been done before, at least not at this magnitude. But if the civil rights movement can do it, so can we. The problem with environmental issues is that too many people think someone else is going to solve the problem. And that's never going to happen. Everyone must contribute. Therefore, think of it this way. If we all lived in a giant apartment complex and a leak developed in the ceiling, most of us would be at the manager's office quickly to request the leak be fixed as soon as possible. In fact, if there was any delay at all, we'd probably make the request again, just louder. Over time, however, we may find out other areas of the complex are in disarray, such as moldy wet drywall inside people's apartments, or rotting beams behind the walls, or cracked pipes. We may not see these things directly most of the time, but they do add up. And eventually, an isolated issue like leaking pipes is actually symptomatic of a larger problem. In this case, the plumbing in the entire complex has become obsolete, and it's now falling apart. And at some point, everybody will be affected. A similar situation exists with the public and the surrounding natural environment. What looks like an isolated incident of damage is really the symptom of a much larger issue. And in this case, the foundation of healthy ecosystems is crumbling. And it's no secret. Habitat degradation is in the news virtually every single day. So let's see whose homes we're really talking about, meaning the wildlife, and who the managers are. It's time for the entire apartment complex, meaning you, to stand up and go complain. Although this is not an all-inclusive list, here are some names and contact information you can start with and send your complaints to them. We'll talk more about this later as well. In the meantime, I'll see you next month, and we'll continue this process and review another relevant topic.